Eddie, everyone's quitting carnivore apparently. What's going on?
Yeah, all of social media will basically have you believe that right now in the carnivore space. It's something that look, we don't have any actual empirics on whether or not it's actually the majority of people. That's the problem that people sort of engage with is the idea that just because some influencers have done it, therefore everyone is. However, the fear, I still think this is urgent, which is why I scheduled this call with you to talk about this because even if it's not the majority of people, these are very influential people that have changed their diets, and it's based on a bunch of really shoddy science is honestly giving it too much credit because it makes it seem like it's still quite ambiguous and all the stuff that I mean a lot of the stuff they're saying is not grounded in any scientific truth at all, and I think it's grounded in an impetuous making process born of slight fear and uncertainty about their decisions based on some certain blood markers or something like that that are taken out of context. I really wanted to talk to you about this because you've had extreme success with carnivore and still continue to do so. And so, I mean, look, everyone, whenever they've transitioned their diet to something else, they may very well experience problems, whether that's due to previous behaviors that they're now changing. So if it was too stark of a change or just the fact that it's a change in general, I wanted to talk to you about some of the problems. You may have talked about this before. I wanted to talk to you about some of these problems that you may have had on carnivore that you didn't have to abandon the diet to ameliorate, if that makes sense. What were problems that you may have seen whenever you were eating such a diet that even if they're subtle, I mean, the subtle stuff I think still matters because they can sort of, depending on who you are, they can compound into more serious problems. I mean, what have you seen and how did you sort of almost internally console yourself and tell yourself, okay, well, that doesn't mean to start dumping 200 grams of carbohydrates down my throat every day to start off with?
Right, that's a good question because I do think there's when you experience an issue, you can get into this kind of it's definitely the diet. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not it's not that necessarily. Like for example, um I'm 50. I've only been doing this diet for 3.5 years almost. And um, for me to think that a problem I had is related to the diet, I have to discount 46.5 years of alcohol poisoning and tobacco use and all this kind of thing. But to give you a specific example of something I could kind of think, oh, maybe this is the diet, is recently I've not had the best sleep. Over the last year, my sleep's
Okay.
been not as good as it was. Um, and I could I could put that down to, okay, the diet stopped working. Maybe when you change your diet and you get rid of the ultra processed foods at first, then you feel better, but eventually your body kind of goes, "Hang on, I need some carbohydrates to be able to work properly," and your sleep is impacted. Maybe it's through hormones or whatever it is, right? Um, but that would mean I would have to discount the extreme amount of stress I've had in my life over the last year from different personal things and all this kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, without going into too much detail, like this extreme amount of stress, which is likely the cause of the sleep disturbances I've had
Yeah.
through
No, that's a good.
ruminating, all that kind of thing. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're good. And no, that's a really good point. And I think that's one of the things that can happen whenever you're in the diet space. You sort of worship the diet. Like whatever, and I mean really in general, like this is across the board with everyone in the diet spectrum. They believe that well, diet has such a huge they recognize that diet has a huge impact on our health status, which makes sense considering basically it's the most intimate it's the factor in your life that has the most intimate influence over your genes. I mean, you're actually consuming something. You're putting a large amount of something inside your body. So of course it would be the most important, but it doesn't mean that the things that can develop, especially this is my biggest grievance. I mean, people fixing years, decades worth of illnesses or of disabilities, debilitating diseases. 3 years, 4 years down the line, in some cases, I'm seeing like 10 or 20 years, they'll go, you know what? Yeah, I started seeing some poor thyroid function, and some not even really electrolyte imbalance, because recently people have been saying it's because of weight stalling or weight gain, actually. So these are people that are sort of in the incipient stages of adopting a carnivore diet, actually. But for the people that are going 10 years, 20 years into this and then saying, well, I started to see poor thyroid numbers, and I started to maybe see some stagnation in the gym or in my performance or something. Well, therefore, it must be the diet. And it's like, hold on. So for 20 years it was fine, and then out of nowhere it's not? I mean, you got to look logically. You could very well be correct, okay? But maybe let's not be so impulsive and immediate to accept that philosophy and that idea, and start, and especially when you're talking about not even just introducing, oh, I'll just have like 20 grams of carbs or something. It's like, no, we're going to start introducing full on baked potatoes, sweet potatoes, start eating a bunch of white rice and fruit and honey and maple syrup. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. Whoa, let's slow down here. Not just that, they're also lowering their fat intake like dramatically in order to compensate. Like, they're like, okay, well, if we're going to raise carbs, you don't want to eat all that with a bunch of fat, so we're going to lower our fat. And it's like, that's really, really, really bugging me. And it makes me think that there's actually some, not ulterior motive. I'm not saying that there's some surreptitious reasoning as to why they're saying this, but I feel like there's a background voice that they're not recognizing that I think is influencing their decision more than what they're actually saying, their conscious voice, which is, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if I could make an excuse for having the carbohydrates? It's a very trite point, but I do believe that that's the case. Like, everyone's looking for a reason to justify the carbohydrate consumption because we have an evolutionary design to consume the carbohydrates, particularly the sweet ones. And so, yes, but to get to my original point, yes, once you recognize that diet has such the major influence over your health, it's really easy to think that therefore any problem you develop it must be because of diet, when in reality that very well may not be the case. And no one's looking at that. No one's looking at that. Like, how much are you actually engaging in resistance training if you're someone that can do that? Some people, when they approach carnivore, they did so much damage to themselves. I'm actually one of them. I'm still recovering. I can't even work out right now. But for the people that can, are you doing that? Maybe that can help with weight stalling, like weight loss stalling and weight and fat loss. That's a lifestyle thing. That has nothing to do with diet. So I don't know. You can let me know your thoughts on that too, because I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, definitely. Look, and I just as an example to take this out of the carnivore space, look at someone like Simon Hill, plant-based advocate, right? Recently, he got some tests back and found out that he has some atherosclerosis developed, right? Now, he's a plant-based advocate, and he's had this atherosclerosis develop. But is it his diet, or is it the last, I don't know how old he is, 20, 30, 40 years of whatever he did before? Maybe it's partying, all that kind of stuff,
Right.
Like, he's not jumping straight to the diet, and I'm not sure that as carnivores we should be jumping straight to the diet if we develop problems either.
Exactly. No, that's actually a really good point, and that's how someone that is unbiased and not plagued by dogma and blinded by dogma thinks. As soon as I saw there's a reason I never commented on that. It was because there's not enough detail to suggest that it's plant based. I'm not going to use that. I'm not going to use that as an example to just or use that as a way to, wield a weapon and hammer it over a bunch of plant-based folks because they're wanting to eat plant-based. I don't even mind if you're eating plant-based on a personal level. I'm not going to advocate for it because I don't think it's the most optimal thing to do. But it doesn't mean that as soon as someone actually does develop a problem on a plant-based diet, I'm going to jump immediately to say, oh, that must be because of the diet. Like, if there's a plausible reason, like if they develop a B12 deficiency, well, I mean, sure, fair enough, right? But if it's something like you said, with the CAC score, that's a really nuanced discussion, like the whole calcium, coronary artery calcium discussion. I mean, we know that there are certain people in the carnivore space. They seem to have, it's the overwhelming anecdote that's presented that they see regressions in their CAC score. That's what we often hear about. But it doesn't mean that it happens in everyone. We just saw recently that someone else that's prominent in the carnivore space tended to have it seemed to have an increase in their CAC score. There's things that we don't know yet. That's not even representative of total plaque. Who's to say that the actual total amount of plaque grew? What if just some of the soft plaque that was there calcified? Then it looks a lot worse than it actually is. So there's a lot of things to discuss. And so I'm glad that you said, okay, we should also lend the same forgiveness and sort of charity in a way, logically, to the plant-based crowd too. But yeah, no, I thought it was a good example that you gave about, it can very well be lifestyle and not diet. Here's a good example of this. We know that a lot of carnivores will develop a phenomenon that is considered oxalate dumping. And I'm sure that you've interviewed plenty of people that have had symptoms of this. And it's very clear that that's what it is and that it's real because of the oxalate crystals like exuding from people's eyelids and other parts of their body. Like it's a very real phenomenon. It's just not talked about. If you were to therefore, if you were to perform a study on people transitioning from a normal diet or whatever diet they were on to a carnivore diet, you might see a massive spike in oxalate dumping. Does that mean to not be carnivore? Carnivore causes oxalate dumping, therefore it's bad for you. Well, hold on a minute. Whoa. What if that the mechanism doesn't even make sense. You have to have a mechanism there. The mechanism is that for decades, these people were consuming large amounts of oxalates, large amounts of them. So who is to say that this is actually due to carnivore? Who's to say that? I think that when we're talking about weight loss, and you've had a great experience with losing weight on this diet, correct?
Yeah, about 34 pounds or something like that. Yeah.
Right, right, and you've kept it off.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Have you had any problems since then with like even at one point, did you start to sort of gain a few pounds back and then have to consider what you were doing, or has that just remained pretty stable for you, or did you stall at all during that process as well? I mean, who knows? Like,
To be honest, it got to a point where I wasn't thinking about it anymore. So, like, I'm the kind of person that when I started, I was weighing myself every day at the
mhm,
same time every day because that was kind of motivating. You notice you go down 300 grams or something like that, and it's like, oh, okay, it's not a lot, but I'm making progress, and keeps you on track. But after a while, I was like, well, this is pretty boring. I'm hovering around the same weight the whole time, and I just stopped. Um, and you know, I mentioned the stress over the last year and stuff. Well, my eating kind of probably increased a little bit at one point or another, and it did. Even though it's carnivore, it does have a bit of an impact because you are
mhm,
eating more, and one of the times you're eating closer to bed. But,
right.
yeah, I mean, it's never been something I've worried about, and that extra little bit of weight seems to be coming off.
Right. Well, yeah, that's good. I know that you spend a lot of time. So you've seen some pretty stable, beneficial results. And the results that you've seen, they've been maintained. But you also interview a lot of people. That's mainly what your channel's about. You interview many people like every day. I wonder if you've heard of anyone, or if you've encountered anyone that has sort of expressed some similar problems. Like, for example, one of the most common ones, again, and it's happening right now. It's one of the most cited reasons as to why these people are introducing carbs into their diet is the poor thyroid function. And I'm going to put that I'm going to put that in quotes because sometimes it seems that they're not actually having poor thyroid function. They get scared that they heard one other person had some symptoms of low thyroid, so therefore they get their thyroid numbers checked and they're lower than the normative levels, and so they immediately think they have a thyroid problem. So then they'll say they do. But for the people that have actually they did deal with this, have you ever dealt with people, carnivores, that have expressed that there was a tumultuous time during their adoption of said diet that may have resulted or may have led them to experience those issues? And then if so, what did they do to ameliorate those problems? Since you're someone that has maintained all of your beneficial associated results.
Yeah, just thinking back, like, I don't think I've interviewed anyone who has had a thyroid condition that got worse
Mm.
or
Hmm.
has noticed their thyroid condition developing or anything like that. Um, I've talked to people who have thyroid conditions that kind of maybe it's stable, hasn't gotten better, but it's stabilized. But um, yeah, I just talking generally because I can't think of a specific example. Um, I think what probably happens is that carnivore starts to improve things when people go carnivore. And they've perhaps got an underlying problem that has
Mm-hmm.
previously been masked before because they're not eating much
Mm-hmm.
fat or they're not eating whatever. They're not eating as much protein or whatever it is. Could be a liver problem, could be a thyroid problem. And once they start carnivore, that issue is suddenly uncovered. I mean, I guess a prime example might be a gallbladder issue or something.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
would be they don't have a problem because they've been eating basically low fat their entire lives. So the gallbladder's just been sitting there going, "Well, I'm broken, but I don't have to do anything anyway, so it doesn't matter."
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
they suddenly go, "Okay, I'm eating sticks of butter now," and it's like your gallbladder's going, hang on, I thought we were on strike."
Yeah.
Um, so
That's a good point
just
too. Yeah.
uncovering carnivore uncovers problems that existed prior, but just were never noticeable before. Maybe.
Yeah. No, that's a good point too. Again, that's just another confounding variable. And it's very similar. It's basically an adjacent point to what we were just saying, which is it doesn't mean that it was actually, it's the diet. It has to do with your past behaviors. I mean, again, I sort of have I guess it's a more cynical viewpoint of the whole situation, which is, the reintroduction of carbohydrates. And it's not because I actually enjoy being cynical. In fact, I try and find any opportunity to not be. But I just can't fathom any other reason. Like, the, it's not to say that these are mutually exclusive either. Someone very well could be developing or not really have developed a new problem, but have, as you said, thought they did because but it existed before. It's just now you're noticing it. And then use that to justify the reintroduction of carbohydrates. Like, I'm actually curious. I hear a lot of people saying that they have no desire anymore. Like, they not only have they completely stopped their cravings for carbohydrates, they have no desire to eat them even when it's in front of them. And I got to admit, I'm someone that envies that because that's something I still actually struggle with. If it's in front of me, then I want it. But I wonder, are you one of those people? And if not, have you found yourself doing the same thing where you may develop like one or two things here and there, and it seems like you're not really developing too much at all. But you talked about sleep issues. Have you started hearing or feeling like your unconscious primitive mind try and justify the reintroduction of carbs back into your diet? Because that seems to be a very common phenomenon in
Mm.
the space, at least in
I
the influencer space.
I haven't experienced that at all. Like, I feel very lucky in that regard. Like, the emotional connection's completely gone now. So I could walk past a bakery, I could walk past a cake shop, I can sit at a table with people eating all that kind of stuff, ice cream, whatever, and I can look at it and I can appreciate, wow, that looks really nice. But I don't have that feeling like the second step of that, like that looks really nice and it's got to go in my mouth now. I don't have the second step anymore. Like, I'm just happy I can sit there and enjoy my, I don't know, iced coffee or whatever it is, and feel good. That has changed for me for both carbs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
However, I know myself, and I know I'm like one of these all or nothing types, So if if I even had a bite of that, then I'm straight down the rabbit hole. That's it. It's all over.
Yep. Yep. No, I can control myself quite a bit. So if there is something in front of me, I can have like a bite or two, as much as I really really want to have more. But I still have too much. Really, in reality, too much is just anything more than nothing. But by too much, I mean like I'll reach just I'll barely reach the threshold, but I'll still reach it to where it'll actually start feeling symptoms. Like, because I'm very sensitive. I've got a very sensitive outset and autoimmune condition. Like I'm very sensitive in that respect. So, but I wanted to ask because, again, I can't come up with any other reason as to why this is happening, because yes, they will use these reasons to just okay, yes, the poor thyroid function, weight loss and weight stalling, higher blood glucose. This is another one that's happening. So higher fasting blood glucose and higher HbA1c. Now, if you've watched enough carnivore content, I'm sure that you've seen that there's quite a bit of nuance. It's pretty the HbA1c is quite an unreliable marker. It's not even just that it's nuanced anymore. It's just that it's actually pretty unreliable because the amount of context that needs to be considered. I mean, it just renders the test in isolation a problem. Like it's completely useless, right? But the fasting blood glucose thing is also interesting. I just talked to Coach Stephen Thomas about this recently. It doesn't seem to be a problem either, though. And I think the irony is the idea that introducing hundreds of grams of carbohydrates into your diet is going to somehow help your fasting blood glucose be better. It's somehow going to, that's better for blood glucose regulation. That's the idea. And I just think that's really silly. Have you measured your blood glucose, or like, have you ever worn a CGM ever since you've been carnivore or anything like that? Could you speak upon that topic at all from
Yeah,
experience?
I haven't, but, that a CGM is something I'd actually like to try. I've just been
Hmm.
kinda lazy about it, but, yeah, I haven't done any of the tests. The only kind of blood tests I've had are, HbA1c,
Right.
and my HbA1c now would people like, if the doctor looked at it, they'd say, "It's okay, but it's probably higher than they'd want it to be."
Right. Yep.
Because like, they'd be saying, "Oh, you gotta get down because it's like 5.6."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they'd be
Yep.
like, it'd be better to get it down to into the 4s or something, you know?
Hmm.
But again, as you say, it's a nuanced thing, right? And the
Hmm.
HbA1c is not necessarily a good test,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Because it is an absolute established fact that your HbA1c value will be influenced by the length of the red blood cells. So I know that it's been said, oh well, the length of red blood cells increases on a carnivore diet. That's why your HbA1c value is higher. And people will often respond to that and go, well, there's no hard evidence of that yet because carnivore is pretty new, right? Except if it's the case, if it's already been proven for decades that the HbA1c value can be artificially lowered because of a decrease in the lifespan of red blood cells. I mean, it's not proof that the carnivore diet or a carnivore diet increases the length of lifespan of red blood cells. So in that case, it still is a theory. But to pretend away the idea that if that is true, if it does, then that's not the cause of the increase in HbA1c value. I mean, that would absolutely cause an increase in HbA1c. And so when you observe people and you look at the rate of red blood cell production, sort of as a proxy measure for, okay, how frequently are they living? Like, how long are they living? In carnivores, from my understanding, I mean, again, it's pretty incipient because carnivore is still pretty new and pretty fringe, actually. I would like to say that it's mainstream within the fringe at the moment, which is progress, but you're seeing that these people have either normal or lower reticulocyte production rates. And then also, if you do a fructosamine assay, so their actual rate of glycation, like how much of their proteins actually being glycated, it's zero, despite higher fasting blood glucose, despite higher HbA1c values. And so if we're using those as proxies for glycation damage, diabetes risk, well, clearly, if you're only using those in isolation without any surrounding context, you're actually doing the patient a disservice because you are now saying that they have an identifiable disease process in the making. And despite the fact that they are exhibiting no symptoms, are telling them to intervene. You are intervening. You are saying, no, this is bad. We need to get this down. It's. I wouldn't say it's fear mongering because fear mongering requires almost, in a way, it must be intentional, like what you're doing, But it is sowing seeds of doubt, irrespective of whether the doctor or the physician concerned is someone that knows about the surrounding context and the importance of it or not. It's still sowing seeds of doubt, and it's discouraging people from embarking upon a carnivore diet and or continuing the diet that they've been on because of a bunch of blood markers taken out of context, which is what I said before we even started talking about this. It's just like this is why I wanted to talk to you about this, because you're someone that has had, you've interviewed many people, many people. I mean, at this point, you're talking what, hundreds? Would you say?
Individuals over 1,200.
Yeah. Okay, I was gonna say it was probably over 1,000. Yeah, and so from your experience, and I know that this isn't the most controlled way of doing things. It's not the most responsible scientific way of doing things because it's not a simple random sample. But from the people that you've talked to, how many of them have like you said it's about 1,200? I'm going to presume that the overwhelming majority have had positive experiences on carnivore. Correct?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, 100%. Of those people, how many how many of them do you think have been on the diet for, or had been on the diet at the time of recording at least, for, I don't know, in the years, like multiple years, for multiple years?
Oh, it's 40 to 50% of the people I interview.
Okay. And so you're still talking about 40 to 50% of those people having positive effects or associated benefits of a carnivore diet, out of 1,200 total people that have done it for years, and not one of them has discussed, okay, thyroid problems, electrolyte problems. We already discussed, like, out of those people, did any of them mention any problems or having to fix any problems? And you actually said no. And I understand that we're talking about a sample size, if you're going to think of this statistically, of 1,200 people, and in this case, a subsection, that being, 5 to 600, really. But it's just, I still, at the end of the day, anecdotes are really all we have, and I think you understand that. I think you're one of the people that actually understands this, because even if we were to get large samples, which is going to cost money, and it's also good, there's politics involved when it comes to getting science published in scientific journals and all that stuff. It's still not going to inform upon what people think that it will inform upon, and that includes carnivores, by the way, like the people that are eating a carnivore diet. I know that a lot of them really want these studies to be done, and it's like, that's great. I mean, look, I would like it to be done too, but I don't really care too much about that, because at the end of the day, we observe what works based on trial and error and talking to people. And that's what I think that you do the best. So therefore, I was just wanting to ask you that question because, it goes back to my original point. How many people are actually having these problems? I'm not going to say it's not a commonly talked about problem online, but how many, in the grand scheme of things, all these people that are eating a carnivore diet, how many people are really developing these symptoms? And if they are, can you really say that that's because of a carnivore diet? I mean, I guess this would lead me into sort of a fun question, something that you don't really have to take too seriously. What would it really take for you to have to reintroduce carbohydrates back into your diet, knowing what your previous diet and dietary patterns have done to you in the past?
Um, what would it take for me to bring it back? It would have to be I've experienced a health issue that I can't put down to something else, and I've noticed a lot of people in the carnivore community saying they had that health issue as well. Like, a weight stall
Mm,
or something like that is not enough,
right.
because and
Yep.
I think, for I'm going to say that I think people that go off carnivore or kind of introduce carbs or whatever because of a weight stall, that feels to me like the like people who went into carnivore solely for weight loss. Because
Hmm.
most of the people I talk to in interviews, when they talk about everything that's improved, they typically say something like, "And the weight loss was just the cherry on the cake." Like, I
Yeah.
wasn't thinking about weight loss anymore. I
Yep.
just don't care about it.
Yeah. Yeah, people tend to think, like, people that aren't actually metabolically diseased and riddled with diseases, and ones that are considered incurable. That's the worst type, because then there's just no hope in sight. Um, those those people. are typically the ones that go on the diet to lose weight. They don't look at a carnivore diet as a species appropriate diet or something the way that humans should be eating. They don't look at it like it's the best approximation to a panacea that we have, in my opinion, because of how many things it's cured. They don't look at it like that because a lot of times they don't even realize that that's why they've heard about it and why it's become as popular as it has. Like the fact that they've even heard about it is something. As much as it's still fringe, as I mentioned earlier, I know people just at the grocery store across the street. They've at least one of them has been like, oh yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, I've heard about carnivore. Like that. That's still a step in the right direction. That's a really significant step. But those people, I think they think of it like any other diet. They think of it like, oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. But if it works, clearly it is because people are losing weight. It's like, no. That's a very superficial way of looking at it. Because some people, as you just said, some people, as much as it does help people lose a lot of weight, some people might gain weight. Especially if they had, anorexia or something like that. We see plenty of people like that. They gain weight. It's a weight stabilization diet, and even then, that's a side effect of what it actually is, which ostensibly, and in my very, 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 very confident opinion, it's the way that we across our species should be eating. And so, of course, it should approximate good health status and good health presentation, optimal indicated health presentation. And so it is a good point. If people go into it thinking that it's just a weight loss diet, then what's going to happen is if they don't have at least immediate excess, or if they do have immediate excess, but then they get a plateau, they're going to immediately think, okay, well, what other thing can I do that'll get it done faster? So I used carnivore as the first tool, the first step. Now what's the next step? Oh, I can eat 200 grams of carbohydrates. Oh, great. That's awesome. Or like, it'll help with it'll help with how my muscles look. It'll make my muscles bigger. Because that's another thing that's talked about. That's granted a little bit of an oversimplification of what's actually said, but that's still something that is said. Oh, it'll look like it'll give you a better pump or something like that. And it's like, that, does that actually mean it's something that you should be doing? Like, really, is that what we're going after? Or like the people that looks like they need to lose another 5 or 10 pounds, and for months they haven't lost it. It's like, yeah, well, could that have been because once again, for decades before that, you were eating another way? Like if you lose, we know that if you lose a ton of weight, you might have, you know, you might have those, what are they called? The stretch marks. You'll have like a lot of excess skin. It's like, well, carnivore may not be able to fix that. Does that mean that you should try and go on another diet to fix it? If there was another diet that did it, it's like, well, no, because the reason that's happening is not because of carnivore. It was actually because of previous behaviors. It all goes back to that. You can't control for that. It's the entire reason why these studies, these human nutrition science studies, are just, that variable is never able to be controlled for. Like, what were these people doing before they were observed? What were these people? The question is also, what were these people doing during the time that they were observed too? But that's a story for another day.
Right. But so you've just triggered me there. That phrase is, I reckon we should try and eradicate it somehow. Nutrition science. It's the biggest oxymoron out there. It should really just be
Yep.
called nutrition guesswork.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, I think one of the issues, thinking of it from a scientific perspective, one of the biggest issues that someone who thinks, okay, well, I've had a weight loss stall, I'm going to see if I can introduce some carbs, or I don't feel good anymore, I'm going to introduce this, that, the other. Probably what's going to happen is after you introduce one thing, you might think, oh, well, I've done okay with that, so I'm going to bring this other thing in, right? And at some
Yeah.
point, maybe you're not feeling good anymore, or you're not getting whatever happened when you first introduced carbs is not how you're not feeling as good anymore, or you're not losing the weight anymore that you thought you were, or whatever. But you're putting yourself into this position where it's very hard to go backwards because you've introduced so many different things over time that you can't go, oh, it was that thing was the wrong thing, so I'm gonna, like, you've just put yourself back to where you were before you went carnivore in the first place.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. Yeah.
Mm. And so I think that's a big risk for people who are thinking about, oh, I'll just add this, or I'll just add this, or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I'm glad that you said what you just said about human nutrition science because yeah, no, I mean it's I mean it does get into the definition of science, which yes, there's different types of science and human nutrition science is technically a science in the fact that it's observational and there's therefore it's necessarily guesswork and all that stuff. And I call me radical for this, but I really, really have thought that we should probably make the definition of science more strict if that's what our standard is for science. Because at the end of the day, how much different is it compared to religion in that respect? And this is not anti-religious, like this isn't even anti-religious rhetoric, because you don't have to think of me saying that I'm bringing religion down to science. You could, if you're a religious thinker, you could think that I'm bringing science up to religion. We're putting them on the same level in this respect. Science in observational science, at the end of the day, if you're just making opinions based on that, and we're not talking about even strong signals acquired anyway. We're talking about very weak signals, like what you're actually looking for, like what you find, weak observations. And you're going to base opinions and base your actions off of that. Well, you might as well construct a church of science at that point. You're worshiping science. So, I mean, I think that one of the ultimate ironies is that given our post-Enlightenment era, we are very scientific as a society and very material in terms of how we observe the world. And therefore, it's been, like religious ideas are mocked from the people that are worshiping science. That's what I think. Like, I'm not even making a pro or anti-religious argument. It's just an irony that I see all the time. Like, these people will consistently worship something that cannot prove what they are saying it proves. They're just believing it. They're just believing it. And it's fine if you want to believe it. My problem, and it's been my major problem. It's been my biggest problem. It is, you can believe all that. You can use these studies to support your points. Don't say it proves it. That's it. Don't do it. And the fact that people can't wrap their heads around it and they construct ways of trying to, they pseudo sophisticate things to make it appear as if it's true that these things can actually inform upon cause and effect, for example. It's just evincing their absolute aversion to the idea of accepting that. And I think it's because of a fear of chaos they can't contend with. They don't like the idea of not being able to establish order in places of chaos, even at the expense of responsibility, even when it's irresponsible to do so. Like they want to make truths. They want to establish something as true with the most cursory reviews of the universe. And this goes into diet. I mean, necessarily.
Well, I think also that kind of it threatens their sense of identity because they've invested their whole life in this idea. Their education, they're carrying around school debt probably still.
Yep.
Their career, their mortgage, their kids' education, everything's wrapped up in this. So it can't not be true.
Yes, that is exactly. No, you said it better than me. You said it better than me because I think it really is that. I mean, imagine you spend, I mean, sometimes we're talking like 8 years in academia, and you're in the foundation of what you're learning is statistics and like, statistical inference and all the thing that human nutrition science is based on, like the thing that it's based on. And you're in multiple fields at once employing this science. And then you realize you hear someone come along and go, oh yeah, by the way, that study that you think can inform upon the entire population of human beings, that's not true, right? And that's impossible to do. And you've just been doing this for 8 years and you haven't even realized what you've been doing. It's like, it's a lot. It's like when someone builds an entire career for like 20 years on something that ends up being false. Are they going to give up that career? Are they going to do that? Like, maybe it might take them a minute to digest that. But oftentimes that's not the case. You're not really going to convince them. At least you're not going to get them to admit it. You might convince them internally and then they might go insane as a result of it because they've realized what they've done. If they have a grounded moral conscience, that's the caveat there. No, I think that's actually the most prevalent reason. You're right. The sense of identity that people put in this science. And again, it goes right back to the worshiping of it though. That's why, like, that you are literally making it a part of your identity. And so, yes, it threatens your identity because you've been worshiping the science as if it can inform upon causality. If it can actually prove the things it says it can prove, why do we still have conflicting studies? Why are so many things up for debate still? Like they must believe they must believe that's because of just denial. And in fact, they say that. They tell us we're in denial. We're in denial of the science. We're anti-science. It's like, we're not anti-science. We're actually pro-science, just a responsibly conducted science. So,
Yeah, but I think it comes down to nuance or context is not financially lucrative because it's harder to explain. So, if you're talking
yeah.
absolutes, if you say LDL's bad, saturated fat is bad, then you can sell more books, you can sell more services that way. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but like, how how do you think this is going to go in the carnivore community as far as do you I sometimes think what's happening is a little bit overblown in a way, in
Hmm.
that
Totally agree.
a couple of carnivores have kind of said, okay, well, I'm going to try introducing carbs or whatever, and it's like everyone's suddenly having a meltdown because they think, because a couple of people have done it, it's going to start snowballing and more people, and maybe they've not been telling me the truth, and maybe carnivore is bad for me and all this kind of thing, and so it's almost like this kind of panic response.
Yes. No, I agree. The reason I said this was an urgent conversation is because a lot of, like, one, I think, a very, I'm not going to name names, but a very, very prevalent carnivore influencer has been carnivore for, like I said, I think decades. She's coming out and saying these things because I think she's been manipulated by these other people that have been saying, well, you should be eating hundreds of grams of carbs. That's very even if it's one or a few people, they have a lot of influence over the space. So even if this is a problem I'm seeing, people that, if no claims had been made, everything would have been fine like that. If they had just transitioned just because they wanted to, people might have been curious, but they would have been like, well, okay, do what you want. But what's going on is people that have been completely symptom free and doing just fine on carnivore are now looking at that and going, oh, I don't want to end up like that though. They're thinking they must change now, even if they're not having problems. And so it may very well not be urgent. I'm still doing this anyway because I still think it's important to do. I'm still talking to people about this. But I don't want people to sabotage their health thinking that they're doing a good thing, because very highly influential people that were on carnivore for decades started to develop a problem there and a problem here, and immediately attributed it to carnivore, the thing that saved these people's lives in many cases. It's like it's almost a result of taking it for granted. Really, like, you just get used to not being sick anymore. So I don't know. That's why I'm doing it.
The thing is, and then if we go back to what we were talking about before, if people do think, oh, well, all these people are living carnivore, so maybe I should do it too. Maybe I'll add in the carbohydrates too. You add in the carbohydrates, and then when you get sick at some point, it's like, you see, carnivore did this to me, and it could not be carnivore. It's the fact you added stuff back in that made your
Yep.
arthritis come back, or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. Or gout or so, whatever it may be. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I'm also worried. I saw very prominent influencer Courtney Luna. She featured in my book. I'm sure that you've at least heard her name once or twice. She introduced carbohydrates back into her diet because she bought into this misinformation way before it became as loud as it is right now. And still, it's pretty contained, but it's, still, I wanted to comment on it. It was enough for me to comment on it. But this was a few months back, and she had gotten to her best weight that she'd ever been at. Like, it was like she looked great, she felt great, and I know that she gained weight back, and she struggled to lose the amount to get to a point where she was when she decided to reintroduce carbohydrates back in. But I think the number was like 20 pounds. Like, she has not been able to get back to the weight that she was before because she was misled, and it didn't make her feel better. It made her feel worse. And so, fortunately, she's one of these people that, as soon as that happened, she didn't just blame carnivore. It was like, oh, this is like, to double down on it. She didn't double down. It was like, clearly that didn't work. She'll say, maybe this works for you, and, then go ahead and do that. And so that's fine. That's a fine response. I'm actually going to respectfully disagree. And I'm going to tell you why. It's not because I'm dogmatic. I don't mind if you eat plant-based, like I said, I don't care. Go ahead and do that. But what I am saying is, I think there's a sense of indifference that is actually, it can trend towards the side of actually damaging people. You're being, what's the word? You're enabling behavior. So like I would say, for example, my friends eat a certain way and it's completely different from me. I don't sit there and evangelize them because that's, first of all, it's rude, it's insensitive. It's like, okay, good. If it's working for you, then fine. However, when they ask me about things, I'm not going to sit there and say, no, keep doing that. If it's working for you, keep doing that. I'm going to still say like, no, I think that, imagine how you could feel, right? Imagine that. But I think that that should at least be conveyed if people are going to make that claim, because it makes people that, it almost makes it look like, well, how much do you actually believe in the diet then? Like how much? If you just think, oh, this is just a diet like any other diet, you know, I'm sorry. I'm not going to say that. Like I genuinely think, I know that people will say that that's dogmatic, and I understand the reasoning, as to why, but I, from every inference we have, it looks like this is how we should be eating, and it's not. Look, this is what I say. It's not dogmatic to say that a lion is a carnivore, right? It would be dogmatic to say that, you know, the plant-based diet causes this and that in every single individual, and because of this study and what. And who does that sound like? You know, like who says that all the time? That's dogmatic, and I make sure not to be. But in that respect, I think that there's a line that we shouldn't cross, which is just saying, do whatever you want until problems arise, and then change your diet. It's like, I'm not really someone that really believes in that. I mean, that's typically that's what's going to happen. People are only going to change whenever things go downhill. But I'm not going to stop encouraging people to prevent that from happening in the first place. So that's what I have to say about what she said in response, and what a lot of these other people are saying in response. But I don't know. Let's get your take on that too. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah. So I'm kind of, I'm probably kind of somewhere in between the middle of what you've said and
Okay.
Courtney Luna, I guess. So like, I agree with you. Like, if someone's sitting there eating junk food at dinner or whatever, I'm also not going to be vegan about it and sit
Yeah.
there and go,
Like, are
"That's
you going to eat that?
disgusting.
Really?
What are you doing? You're that every mouthful is a mouthful of death for you," and all. I'm
Yeah.
not going to get
Yep.
into that. But if they say to me, like, "How's your eating going? Like, what's happening with you? Are you feeling good? Does that tell me about it?" I'm going to tell them the honest truth, and I'll talk as long as they want me to talk. I'm not gonna
Exactly.
smack them over the head with it, but I'm also gonna take the, kind of look at it like, if someone's been carnivore and they decide to, you know, put in some berries or some nuts or whatever, and it's working for them, I'll just go, "Oh, yeah, no, go about it, whatever."
Uh,
Uh, I just yeah, I think, maybe I'm just getting older and I'm just I don't wanna get involved with the fights and whatever, but yeah.
oh, yeah. No, I get it. I get it. I think you and I are pretty much on the same page. It's one of those things where I always want to make sure that, since everything has been made public about people reintroducing this stuff, they can go ahead and do what they want. But I'm also going to make a video saying, okay, this is cool, this is great. However, I don't personally condone it, like to an audience member, because I don't want them to look at that and then think, oh, well, if it's working for them, then I can do the same thing too, and it'll work the same for me. And it's like, well, okay, hold on a minute. Do you really want to take the risk? Like maybe we want to approximate the optimal. It's one of those things. I think this is a good way of putting it. We always form an ideal logically, and we always try and approximate that ideal as human beings. If you deviate away from the ideal about 5% to the point where you're 95% ideal, it doesn't mean to make the ideal what you are doing by approximating the ideal by 95%, because then you shift the goalpost. That is my problem a lot of times. It's like, oh, okay, well, 20 grams of carbohydrates a day for someone that's carnivore. Like otherwise they're just strict carnivore, 20 grams of carbs a day. That can very well work for people. In fact, I would say that would still help people tremendously. It does. Some people do that. But are we then going to say, okay, well, then that's the ideal? Because if you do that, then therefore people will say, oh, well, then it must be fine to up it to 40. But then it's like, oh, well, people are doing fine there. So, okay, that's the ideal actually, 20, 40 grand. It's like, that's why I think that there should at least be a bar set. And then just to make sure people can cross the bar and that's fine. But we have to be careful not to shift the bar over because they crossed it, because we're like, oh, well, they still do fine if they do that. It's like, well, Yeah,
'Cause,
until they don't.
yeah, then where does it end? You know,
Exactly.
like, carnivore is now the sad diet. It's like the sad
Yes.
diet, AKA carnivore.
Yeah. And then they'll say, "Well, see, carnivore didn't work like we thought it would." And it's like, "Well, no, 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 you perverted it. You changed it to something completely different." And so when people have the blueberries and the nuts, that's technically, according to what is appropriate, it seems from every inference we have, it's technically a deviation away from the ideal, even if you're still 99% ideal. And so what I'll say is, okay, you're 1% away from the ideal. The ideal is still this. Please be careful if you're listening to this person, like not to just impetuously be like, okay, well then I can do that, because it's a slippery slope. Always, it's always a slippery slope. And I mean, you see that happen in society with just not just diet. I mean, you're talking anything. The way that laws evolve, like that. This is how it starts, you know. And so I don't want, again, I don't want people to think that I don't want people to think. Probably people are still going to think this, but that it's like it's getting to it's to a point where I'm now being the religious one. Like I'm the dogmatic one that says that you're not a true carnivore if I'm not like that. I'm not like that at all. I acknowledge the importance of a standard that shouldn't be shifted because people are still doing well. They're not developing symptoms because they're on a deviation from the ideal diet, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Just to touch on what I mentioned before when we talked about, people are panicking because a few of the main people are talking about going off carnivores, or introducing carbohydrates, is um, that when you've got a community which is very focused on one way of eating, which is like high fat, pretty much zero
Mm,
carbohydrate,
hmm.
when one or two people come out and say, "We're introducing carbohydrates," they, to coin a phrase from my father, they stand out like dog's balls. They they it's very noticeable, because suddenly
Right.
they're very unique.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, "Oh, okay, well, I need to pay attention. Something's happening here."
Yeah.
And I think, from that perspective, people need to focus on, "Look, this is working for me. I feel good. Just I can stay the distance with this. I don't need to." I've been doing this for 3.5 years. Rick Rodriguez has been doing this for 40 years,
Yeah.
42
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
years, you know?
Yep. That's
Um,
crazy. Yeah.
how long's Sean Baker been doing this? How long's Anthony Chaffee been doing this?
Yeah. Long time.
It's yeah. I we don't necessarily have to throw the, I don't even know if this is the right metaphor, throw the baby out with the bathwater because a couple of people have started putting carbs in.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree. I guess the final question that I'll ask you is from your experience with all the people you've interviewed, hearing these stories and from your own personal experience, what would you say personally to these people that are introducing carbohydrates back in, that, really, really impulsively, because they're hearing these things that are being said by certain previous now previous carnivore influencers, or at least low carb influencers. What do you have to say about them? Do you think that's do you think that's an okay thing to do? Do you think that's not? I mean, I think we already got your opinions out there, but in a comprehensive sort of final diluted, isolated sort of form, what would you say to these people
Sure.
personally?
I would say, if you want to test something, go ahead and test something. Just remember where you came from, and remember the pain you were in, the problems you were suffering from, and you don't want to go back to that point. If you wanna test something, this is not necessarily something I'm recommending. If you wanna test something, fine, but you have to test it in a controlled way. You can't just start adding in this, that, the other because, "Oh, today I feel like this, and tomorrow I'm gonna feel like this." You can't do that because you're gonna put yourself back in exactly the same position as before. So if you are gonna do something, do it in a controlled way and only try introducing one thing in a certain amount, very, very
Mhm.
slowly and see how you react to that. And then if you don't react badly to that, don't see that as your key to, "Whoa, well, I'm just gonna let loose now, and it's the pumpkin pie, and it's the, frappuccinos from Starbucks and everything from there," because, again, you'll go straight back where you were.
Yep. No, I completely agree with that. Wise words from Dave Mack, if you're watching. So, yeah, well, look, listen, Dave, it was a really good experience talking to you again. It's been a while, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. You've interviewed a lot of people, and you've also been carnivore for years. So, you seem like an appropriate person to talk to and send a message to people that may, even if they haven't deviated, they haven't given into the pressure, the social pressure that this has actually created. They might still be uncertain. I think that this is useful for people like that. So, thanks for coming up on the channel. It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, cheers. You too, Eddie.